So let me bring you the news of what is happening now. US President Donald Trump has said the United States is negotiating with Iran to end this war, declaring that the two sides have had 2 days of very good and very productive conversations. And he said the conversations will continue through the week. So that is very good news. Of course, Iran state television has put out something completely different. They've said US president backs down following Iran's firm warning. So for two countries that are possibly in negotiations at this point, they have two very different readings of what is going on. The stock market and the crude oil market have reacted very positively to this. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 1.6% as we speak. S&P 500 futures is up about 1.5%. NASDAQ 100 is up 1.6%. The global oil benchmark, which is Brent crude, has cooled off by 7% in the time this announcement was made. So it's now below $100 a barrel, which is a massive comfort for everybody around the world. Remember, it climbed up to $114 a barrel. This is according to CNN. CNN is reporting this. So it's a really interesting space that we are in right now. All of us around the world are breathing a sigh of relief, and we are hoping that this is the beginning of the end, that this is the ceasefire that will take us to the end of this West Asia conflict, because it did seem like it was escalating quite drastically this morning, and I'll tell you why. I know that a couple of our viewers feel that they're buying time, and I'm going to, through this conversation, tell you the reasons why I believe that Trump had put himself into a corner where he could no longer continue with this. It had become really difficult for him, and he had to find a way to call this off because it was no longer tenable for him to continue. So there may be various ways in which America will actually paint this as a victory, but what it is Donald Trump being isolated and defeated by himself, internally within America, externally among his allies, to a point where he could no longer continue with this war. So let me first tell you through this what has actually happened, and then I will tell you my reasons of why I believe that Donald Trump had cornered himself. He painted himself into a corner, and he had no other choice at this point. So what has happened today? President Donald Trump has extended, he had given Iran a deadline saying in 48 hours, if you don't open the Strait of Hormuz, that we will actually bomb your power plants. Now he has made an announcement saying that basically we are holding off on all strikes in Iran because we're having very good productive conversations, and it could lead to a complete and total resolution in the war. Talks will continue throughout this week. So a 5-day ceasefire, where Trump has said that they will not hit at Iran, although there are some Twitter messages saying that there are bombs still flying from Iran, but we're going to take our good news where we get it. Trump is also, he did not elaborate on those diplomatic negotiations. And like I said, Iran did not acknowledge any talks between the two countries. Trump suggested a winding down, remember, of military operations on Friday. Today is Monday. He had said that he's looking at winding it down, and he listed 5 objectives that Washington's had to enter this conflict, which he says is now close to its achievement. So based on his social media, platform, these are the actual objectives. I'm smiling because one of our viewers has said taco, and you'll hear a lot of taco. Taco is American code, also diplomatic code for Trump always chickens out, that he never actually sees it through. So bluffing is his sort of negotiation tactic. The 5 objectives that were actually listed by Trump, one, and this I'm reading from his own list, right? Completely degrade Iran's missile capabilities, destroy Iran's defense industrial base, eliminate the Iranian Navy and Air Force, prevent Iran from achieving nuclear capability while remaining ready to respond, and protect Middle Eastern allies. Now, this is what Trump said were his objectives, and he said that he's achieved those objectives. Now, I want to remind you that just yesterday, he had threatened to obliterate Iran's power plants if Tehran does not reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Trump basically set a 48-hour deadline, and he said that 48 hours from this exact time, if the Strait of Hormuz is not fully open, that we will obliterate various power plants, starting from the biggest one first. Now, not to be left behind, Iran responded saying, following previous warnings, if Iran's fuel and infrastructure is violated, that by the enemy, all energy, information technology, desalination infrastructure belonging to the US regime in the region will be targeted. Now, effectively, these two threats sent everybody into a panic. Because if this is carried out by these two countries, then it would plunge millions of people in that neighborhood into complete darkness without any power and without water. And I'll tell you why, and why this was completely untenable. The biggest power plant in Iran, a nuclear power plant, is in Bushehr, which is about 750 kilometers from Tehran. It's also home to the Iranian Navy. They have a base there, and they have a civilian military airport. And it contributes 1 to 2% of Iran's entire power requirements. It's very strategic. Most Gulf nations, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, rely on desalination for almost all their drinking water. So if there's a strike on Bushehr, which is a nuclear power plant, a radiation leak into the Persian Gulf will poison the water for everybody, for millions. So no water to begin with. Iran's entire electricity capacity, 90,000 million watts, comes from natural gas energy needs. So without electricity, so if you hit its power plants without electricity, Iran cannot process or export oil or natural gas, which means a disruption in Iran's energy will actually disrupt global oil markets and send gas prices through the roof. And Iran, since 2017, apparently has been exporting electricity to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iraq. So, if you hit the ability to generate electricity in Iran, then you plunge all of these countries into darkness as well. So, then that entire neighborhood, that entire grid goes down. So, Donald Trump saying that he will obliterate any power generation facilities will mean very bad things, not for people, not just for people in Iran, for millions of people in Iran, for millions of people across that entire neighborhood. It will hit their water supply. It will, it will hit their power supply, and that is a massive, massive problem. Remember, Iran also fired missiles towards Israel's Dimona, which is its nuclear research center, and hit the building. And so most of these countries were really nervous about the fact that any sort of this sort of escalation will hit power generation even more. Remember, Qatar Energy had already issued force majeure saying that it can no longer generate LPG and cannot pass it on. Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, none of these countries were able to generate electricity, and that would have been a massive problem. Of course, Iran would have, they said that they will have zero restraint and a fierce retaliation, and that would mean actually hitting their Arab neighbors, drawing those neighboring countries into a full-scale conflict, something that would choke up, obviously, oil support, supplies for the rest of the world. So really quite worrying. But I want to take you through why I believe the US might have actually had to pull out. One is, like I said, oil prices. Oil prices were at $114 a barrel, $115 a barrel. The US's ability to take that pain is up to $120 a barrel. They can't sustain after that. And even though Trump kept saying, oh, we have enough oil, we have enough oil, the truth is the way the American system is designed, their gas station or their petrol pump links their prices paid to the global price of crude. That's how their system is designed. So as the price went up, it will become more and more difficult for him domestically. Second is the sheer cost of this escalation. According to the Center for Strategic International Studies, apparently the bill for this was growing by $500 million every day, growing by $500 million a day. The Pentagon officials told lawmakers in a closed-door briefing that the war costed $11.3 billion in the first 6 days. And then the CSIS actually said the cumulative cost was $12.7 billion. So that was the second reason. One was actually the price of oil, which Trump could not afford, and none of his allies stood by him. Secondly, the actual cost to America. Thirdly, the fact that National Counterterrorism Center Director Joe Kent, remember I told you he had resigned and he was a Trump appointee. He was a hardcore Trumper. And he resigned basically saying that the entire war is based on a lie and Iran posed no threat to the US. And he claimed also that the administration started this war because of pressure from Israel and a powerful American lobby. And he then went and did an interview with Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, both of whom are journalists who are extremely right wing. So they're loved by the MAGA people. So he actually went to them and he spoke to them about how he believed that Israeli intelligence was bypassing American intelligence, speaking to lawmakers in America directly, saying, "Oh, this is not official, but I can tell you they have weapons." So he actually, he was like, the whole system has been short circuited and Israel is sort of running the system. This is hugely embarrassing for the White House. It is hugely embarrassing for Donald Trump. Now, Joe Kent walked around Donald Trump a little bit. He said Donald Trump is taken seriously and he's the guy and he's the this and he's the that, but it was still pretty embarrassing. If you've seen that conversation, it was really something. He basically said that Israeli intelligence was short circuiting the entire White House, and White House lawmakers were not waiting, decision makers were not waiting for American intelligence to give them wires officially about Iran's capacity for making weapons. They were unofficially being tipped off by Israeli officials and they were pressured into that war. Now, that is my reason number 3. That would have been hugely embarrassing for Donald Trump to continue any further when such a massive insider has come out and said that he has been misled into a war that has costed more than $12 billion and he has no way out. Number 4, the fact that it seemed like Trump's only ally, because all of his other allies have abandoned him, his only ally, Benjamin Netanyahu, not only seemed like he was on a different page and they were not on the same page, he was off on his own trip during this entire thing. So Benjamin Netanyahu, rejected any claim that it was Israeli intelligence that was sort of nudging Trump. He says, does anyone really think that someone can tell President Trump what to do? I misled no one. I didn't have to convince the president about the need to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear program. Now, remember, Israel attacked South Pars, which is a key Iranian offshore gas field. And when that happened, Donald Trump basically said, I told him not to do that. So it suggested, he suggested that Netanyahu effectively acted alone. And that actually raised eyebrows across the world, saying, so what is going on? These two guys are not on the same page anymore. That Netanyahu seems to be not effectively listening to Trump, or they're not listening to each other. So, and also there were reports of the fact that Israel at this point, while they started this saying Iran is the main target and they want to sort of disarm Iran, Netanyahu started basically attacking Lebanon. He has displaced 1 million people in Lebanon and apparently also given orders to demolish homes, according to a report in the BBC, in a sort of Gaza format. So 1 million people from Lebanon have had to evacuate their homes, and now he's demolishing those homes. And there's been a lot of talk about the fact that he's used this opportunity to expand territory for Israel, while America keeps Iran occupied. He is actually looking for that greater Israel idea from the Nile to the Euphrates, because he wants to expand the territory of Israel. And that is not the stated purpose that the people of America were given. So they're going to be asking, why are we in this war at all? So that is, reason number 4. The fact that Netanyahu seemed to have had his own objectives at this point, and the two of them didn't really seem like they were on the same page. And then, of course, there was the final global pressure, the fact that, like I said, the markets were tanking across the world, investors across the world were losing money. And this is language Donald Trump understands, that oil prices were high, currency markets were in a flux. Oil markets were in a flux. Various countries, including countries like India, who have nothing to do with what is going on, were suffering shortages, were headed towards a crisis. If this had continued, India would have headed towards a gas shortage crisis for no fault of our own. We would have had to begin rationing, sort of gas resources. And our various, and that was the story I was preparing for you today. Our textile industry would have been hit, our tea industry would have been hit, fertilizer industry would have been hit. So we were preparing for a really bad time. So this needed to have been called off at this point. The allies made it very clear they want no part in it. So Donald Trump at this also found himself reversing a lot of decisions he made, allowing people to buy Venezuelan oil, allowing countries to buy Russian oil, giving Russia the upper hand that he spent the last 1 year sort of negotiating away from Russia. So he just made a whole hash of everything Donald Trump was doing. And in my opinion, as of this morning, Donald Trump would have woken up alone, isolated, and very possibly defeated, because Iran's strategy here, being the smaller of the two parties, obviously does not have the kind of firepower that America or Israel and the combination of the two of them have, just buckled down and waited it out, frustrated the oil market, frustrated the Gulf neighbors, and just pulled through. The fact that Donald Trump did not, I mean, he put out these objectives, but what are these objectives? They don't really make sense. How can you suddenly decide that not only will this country not have a nuclear weapon, according to me, they will not have any navy? Who gives you the right to decide that some country should not have a navy? It also made matters worse when their head of intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, basically said Washington's motive was to destroy Iran's ballistic missile program. Whereas Netanyahu's was to topple Iran's leadership. So lots of mixed messages going to the American public that they would have been really, really unhappy about. So hopefully this is the beginning of the end of this war, and this ceasefire now turns into a permanent ceasefire. Leave me a comment in the comment section of why you think Donald Trump actually did this.